Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Mushet. I'm a reporter here at the Western Standard. And today my guest is Karimveer Lal. He's a lawyer at James H. Brown and Associates. And he also used to be a legislative researcher at the Alberta Government Caucus, supporting elected officials in designing policy and legislation. Today he's my guest because the Care First insurance policy resolution is being introduced at the UCP AGM, which is the last weekend of November. He introduced his policy resolution. It's to amend the Care First system, which is supposed to be introduced in January 2027. So I wanted to talk to him more about that today. So thank you again, Karimveer, for joining us. And yeah, so my first question to you would be, why did you introduce this policy resolution, and why do you think it would be wise for the government to basically amend the policy?
Sure. So I guess like my comment with that is I believe that the UCP in the past had passed a policy back in, I think, about 2022, 2023, basically saying that they didn't want to see no-fault insurance introduced into Alberta. Now, the exact wording of that policy that was passed back then referred to or directly referred to DCPD, which is direct compensation for property damage. And just generally, I figured that resolution was a little bit too specific. Ultimately, I think that, Conservative members should support fault-based insurance just because that's consistent with, Conservative values of accountability and, personal responsibility. So I don't think that the UCP members themselves support no-fault insurance. They certainly don't support, David Eby's style. And of course, David Eby is the premier who introduced no-fault insurance into BC. So I think that I figured that Conservative members would likely be in favor of repealing no-fault insurance and returning back to a fault-based system. And I was pleased to see that resolution will be debated at the upcoming AGM.
Okay, so on that note, since it's going to be debated and everything, you're saying it's obviously a very important issue. That's why the party chose it to be voted on by the members. So do you think that most people will end up voting to basically amend the policy? And also, why do you think as well that the party even decided, well, most of the MLAs who voted for it, to put in place the Care First system to begin with?
Sure. So I certainly hope that UCP members would support it. I think that it's the right thing to do, and it's, consistent with Conservative values, in my opinion. Of course, we'll see how the members vote this weekend. But in terms of why the government considered this policy, I think the rationale was a little bit different back when the policy was first being introduced by the government. So when the government passed the legislation, which was, of course, earlier this year, sometime in the spring, sort of the trade-off that they had discussed was that consumers would save about $400 on their auto insurance. And in order to achieve those savings, the government would essentially restrict the ability for individuals to sue at-fault drivers, to essentially those who are just victims of criminal offenses. I guess as time has gone on, the insurance companies have been indicating that they don't believe that the government is going to achieve any sort of savings, given that under the no-fault system, they'll be giving more generous benefits to everyone, regardless of their fault. So, and given that, and given the propensity of no-fault systems to be vulnerable to things like fraud from bad actors and organized crime, I think that the policy rationale for introducing the no fault system has changed quite substantially. So I'm hoping that, if the government is so inclined that they take another look at this policy, because I think what they have currently isn't what's right for Albertans.
Mm. So, yeah, so if most people vote to amend it, do you think like the government will start acting right away to potentially change it, or how do you think that will look?
Sure. So, I mean, of course, the wording of the policy resolution is to essentially repeal no fault insurance. I think that, as you know, all policy resolutions that are passed at the UCP AGM are non-binding on the government. But what it instead would show is, I think, just the general will of the membership and how they feel about this particular issue. So, if the message from the members is very clear that they don't want to see, no fault insurance in Alberta, I would hope that the government, considers that very carefully, because, it wouldn't be, consistent with the wishes of their own members. But I mean, of course, how the government chooses to act on a, policy resolution passed at the UCP AGM is ultimately up to cabinet.
Hmm. Well, on that note as well, say most members vote that they want to repeal it. Um, do you think that if the government doesn't repeal it, it's not going to be a good look for them, or what do you think?
I would certainly think so. I think that when it's very rare that you see a like a UCP policy that's passed that's sort of like directly in opposition to what the government of the day is actually hoping to accomplish. Now, I think that if the government is takes this into consideration, they would see that the original policy trade-off that they made no longer applies. So it's potentially worth taking another look. The idea was always, well, we'll restrict your right to sue unless like there's a criminal offense, and in return, everyone will save $400 on auto insurance. Which I mean, I personally would disagree with that, but it's a valid decision for the government to make. Obviously, affordability is the number one issue on a lot of folks' minds. But given the fact that there isn't going to be any savings associated with this new policy, I would think that the government should, very strongly consider taking another look at it, because essentially what they'll be doing is, trading away folks' rights for nothing.
Hmm. Well, yeah, so also, since you're a lawyer, why don't you just go into maybe a bit about what you are most concerned about if Care First is actually passed?
Sure. So, of course, Care First is the government's branding for their privately run no fault insurance system, which is somewhat unique in Canada, given that it would be like the first privately run no fault auto insurance system. Ontario sort of has a hybrid privately run model, but this would be one where you can't sue for any circumstances other than if there's the at-fault driver is a criminally convicted of something. So very similar to what the policy is in British Columbia. So British Columbia, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan all have publicly run no-fault systems, very similar to the WCB in every province. One of the concerns that I would have as a lawyer who represents folks who are injured in various types of accidents, mishaps, and malpractice, etc., is that when you're dealing with private companies, ultimately, like, they're driven by their bottom lines, and they're not necessarily motivated by what makes what's best for Albertans. So, for example, even though, say, the WCB is, has lots of problems and lots of folks aren't happy with it, it is somewhat accountable to the elected officials because it is a government-run system. When you're dealing with private insurance companies and they're basically saying, well, if you have a dispute with us, there's going to be, no recourse and no meaningful way to dispute the decisions of a private company. I mean, I think the concern that you'll see is folks will, get cut off, and you won't really be able to keep them effectively accountable to ensure that the people who need it most are getting adequately compensated.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's all the questions I had for you. So thank you again for joining us, Kurumveer. We really appreciate it. Um, and if you guys liked this video and you want to see more of our news stories, you can visit our website. It's westernstandard.news, and check out our YouTube channel as well. But if you visit our website, you can subscribe. And if you subscribe, it's $10 a month or $100 a year. It's a really good deal, so you guys should do that. And that's about it. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.